Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out. For those of you who are here, thank you for coming out on such a really cool night. And for those of you online, which always surprises me after our council meetings to know how many people actually do watch us online. I'm glad you're staying home, staying warm, probably have the football game up right next to this proposal. I want to introduce Brian Wright. He's with the Town Design and Urban Planning. Was that correct? Collaborative? A whole lot of TPUDC, Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. They've been working with us this week with opening presentation on Wednesday, several drop-in meetings, and then gatherings on Thursday and Friday, and then been working it all today. I was mentioning something to Brian last night about just a little idea, and he sketched it out on the map. I was like, my gosh, the guy's just an expert. So there's going to be a lot of wow factor to what we see tonight, and I'm going to pass it over to Brian and let him get started. We'll be here for a little bit, and I think you're really going to like what you see. Do you want this?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, great. All right, so see some new faces in here, so that's good. So I'm Brian. I am the principal of TPUDC and have been leading a team of experts, planners, coding, zoning experts, and graphic designers and others. And we have been having a good time, thinking some big ideas for you all, listening and trying to understand where it is you want to go for the future. So we've got a presentation I'm going to run through pretty quickly, and then we'll do question and answer, and then we'll go have dinner. So we'll focus on this screen over here, if that's okay. That's one that everybody seemed to look at the other night. So for us, as we look forward to the future, we always start by looking backwards, especially in a place like this, where you have amazing history and historic core that everyone is so proud of, and so studying that really helps us. In many cities, see the best of times, at least from a planning and architecture perspective, and so that's always inspirational. And then also studying your more recent work in your comprehensive plan, your current zoning ordinance, the Live Well Monroe Mill District plan, and other things. And making sure that, especially with the comprehensive plan, because it's relatively new, that we wanted to bring forth all the great thoughts, the time and effort y'all put into that process. And so we've studied that and taken that in consideration. And then, our process, the Codeapalooza process, began with the opening presentation and hands-on workshop the other night, and we got lots of good feedback from the participants, and they were basically played planners for the night. We had several technical meetings, different topics. We had a downtown meeting. We had a meeting about walkable streets and a meeting about greenfield development as well. We had our design studio open so that people could drop in at their convenience, and a lot of people took advantage of that because they couldn't make it to a meeting or a presentation at any certain time, and so that was nice. And we had also people tuning in online as well. So through the process, we heard several things. The number one thing we heard about was the price of housing here. We heard that people love and want to maintain the small town charm and character of this place. Everyone loves downtown. And they want a mix of different housing types as a solution for some, creating a wider range of price points for housing. People want to be able to age in place here because your population is getting older, and don't want to have to leave this great place when your house doesn't suit you anymore. More sidewalks, bike lanes, and trails. We heard about the good work y'all are doing with making new little pocket parks and things, but people wanted more. Tons of opportunity and inspiration. People were just thinking about and looking for recreation and wanting to preserve the mill history, not just the buildings, but just sort of the idea and the vibe of that kind of mill situation. So the mapping exercise that everybody participated in, we took all the dots off the map and all the notes And then we started to put them in the computer so that we could start to see where clusters of dots of different colors, the green dots, if you remember, were places that people love, the red dots were places that needed improvement, and the blue dots were areas of opportunity. And so we looked at all of those and compared them also to the comprehensive plan and the different sub areas that you have there. And then based on what we had been hearing verbally during the meetings and different things, we started looking at some ideas of where we might start to illustrate some of the ideas about planning. And then here you can start to see how the different colors all sort of cluster up. And of course, the big green blob in the middle, I'm sure, is downtown. So as we've been talking about this week, we're coding for character, and that ties right into people's desire for maintaining the small town charm, and making sure that you don't lose the essence of Monroe as you move forward, and new development comes in. We do that by adding some tools to the zoning district, zoning ordinance. And one of those things is we talk about frontage types, and that's how the building meets the street. And we talk, and that's what that looks like. And so some of those might be porches, stoops, storefronts. Think this isn't rocket science here, but normally zoning codes don't take those sorts of things into consideration. We talk about civic space types. Instead of just saying green space or open space, we say parks and plazas and greenways and pocket parks, et cetera. We talk about building types, and so this is one way that we're able to make it easier to have a wider variety of different housing types, and also, in that case, different price points. So the idea of having standards for building types simplifies that process. And so, we calibrate that to what those would look like here. While I said that we're focused on, maintaining and preserving the small town charm and character, we are still looking at uses, though, to some extent. They just go from being the most important thing to like the sixth most important thing. And so anybody who's used to thinking about uses, it'll still be in there. You just might not have to look at it as often. Because if you think about any of the buildings here in the historic part of the city, especially right on Broad Street, how many different things have they been over the years? Somebody built the building and somebody went in there and did the first thing, and it was a general store or a seed and feed or who knows what. And next thing you know, it's a barber shop, and then it's an accountant, and then it's a restaurant, and then somebody lives in it during the recession or who knows what. It didn't matter, right? Nobody really cared as long as you weren't doing some sort of large-scale industrial or doing something that would hurt someone or be really loud or obnoxious. But even in a downtown area, people have a higher tolerance for noise. It's more active and more vibrant, and so we even take those kind of things into consideration as part of character. We've been looking at, and we'll continue to do so, look at thoroughfare types, road types, street types, knowing that the character of a place is heavily influenced by the way the road feels as it goes through. And I used the example the other night of you wouldn't want a rural country road being Broad Street. Broad Street needs to feel like a more commercial, more mixed use, more vibrant area, and it has its street trees and rather than in a big grass planting strip. They're how they are, and they've got wider sidewalks and awnings and those sorts of things all add to that streetscape experience. And we've heard a lot about biking, so looking at bikeway types as well. And then one of the important things that we're going to do is make the character-based or form-based part of the zoning ordinance that we're creating super easy to use so that anyone can understand it and can use it. So it sort of empowers the property owners. It makes staff's life easier, so they're not having to try to dig through we always laugh at we working on one zoning code one time, and they didn't even have a use table. They had a use paragraph. And so it has you can do this, comma, this, comma, this, comma, this. Can you imagine just sort of having to read through all that? It's not user-friendly, and that's the way most zoning ordinances are. Now, I keep talking about, and we've been talking about throughout this week, the small town charm that people have asked to maintain and the idea of character. And so I described this in the opening presentation, these different character districts, starting from the edge at the left-hand side of the screen, CD1, which is nature, and then you sort of move your way in, and it gets more and more, sort of human manipulation of the area. So the second district, rural, might be agricultural zone. You have a third district that would be more sort of standard single-family detached lots, houses on larger lots. Let's step back a little bit. As you get a little bit closer into the center, you start having some attached like townhouses and smaller lots and houses pulled up closer to the street, and some commercial coming in, and sort of neighborhood conveniences. And then as you get towards the center, it's, as you would imagine, sort of on Broad Street. It's the most urban part. And it's predominantly, if not exclusively, attached and multi-story and whatnot. So we wanted to understand how this is applicable to you. And so this is actually, the idea of this sort of rural to urban thing is called a transect. So this is your transect here. And so we'll zoom in. And so here is at the top of the image is nature, getting into the second zone, which is sort of the agricultural, starting to transition into the third, which is more of the single-family residential. And then as we move down a little bit more, you can actually see here we are. Here's City Hall right here in the image there. And so we're making our way down Broad Street at this point. And there's your water tower and the courthouse. And so, wanted to zoom in as well and start understanding what each of these can feel like at the street level. Is it more of an experiential? And again, this is really just reinforcing what we're talking about. But, in this third character district, this is really, kind of where we're starting, because for at least this exercise of the form-based component of this, we're not having to deal with the CD1, the natural area, or 2, the more rural area. So starting with the third one, and what you'll see here is that it's not like one setback, for instance, right? And that's the beauty of how we think about zoning. It's a bit more of a organic process. So instead of saying, well, the setback in CD3 is 30 feet, so every house on the street is like that. Well, when you, like right now on Church Street where we're staying, one of the houses that half of our group is in is like, 15 feet from the street. And the other house right next door, where the other half of our group is staying, is like 40 feet back. And so there's a range, but it all feels like it goes together, and it makes the street more interesting because the houses do all that. Whereas a more sort of modern and conventional suburban mindset is more like, you just kind of have them all laid out like little soldiers down the street, and it doesn't quite feel as interesting as a street like Church Street, for instance. So you'll see that all over your historic district, and the areas that people love the most have a lot of organic variety. And so we, through our process, will make sure that that is embedded within what we're doing. So this would be the fourth character district. And in a lot of ways, people think about this type of character district as one of the most interesting. And here's why. So imagine that you were in a neighborhood, and we heard people talking about the desire to have more neighborhood centers that had some interesting thing, a place to go and hang out, or get some daily needs met, as opposed to having to go all the way into downtown on Broad Street, or out to the strip mall or wherever. And so here you see on the corner, you've got the little cafe, and maybe somebody lives above, and there's some outdoor dining, and that's nice. And you can imagine if you live in the house, this little white house is just behind that brick building. That would be quite convenient, and you would probably go there a lot. And then as you move down the street, you see again, some small-scale mixed-use shops on the ground floor, a little hardware store coming in, and but a nice streetscape. And then when you get to the next block, there you actually see 3 townhouses that fit right in. And then beyond those are single-family houses, and single-family houses are just past this commercial building with the porch on it. And so it has this sort of neighborly feel. And within there, you can't see it in this image, but the garage for the single family house or the townhouse would have a little apartment above it or whatever. And so you have a wide variety of pricing and different types and experiences of ways to live just within this one character district. So this one is often a really, not only interesting one, but one that works well to solve some of your housing challenges because you can have, all sorts of things in there. And so then this one is, more recognizable. This isn't exactly Broad Street, by the way, but this, the idea of the 5th character district being the most urbane. Now, one of the things that's tricky is, as we were working on this rendering, you see there's one 4-story building in here, right? Now, currently, you actually can go 5 stories. Okay, so 5 stories is possible, and the comprehensive plan actually says 6, right? Yep. So I felt like if I had to put a building that actually went off the slide, I didn't know how that was going to sync up with small town charm. However, there are things that you can do besides just build straight up, right? So if that building, where that white cornice line is, if that story, the top story stepped back and there was another story above it, you wouldn't notice it as much from the street. So there's things we can do, but as we need to work together to decide what is the appropriate height that would allow you to maintain that charming character. Now, that said, even if you allow it to continue to be 5 stories, which typically you don't downzone things, right? So the parking in any given historic area like this starts to dictate what you can actually do. Unless you get a parking structure or something like that, then the size of a lot is going to limit it, and so it would be probably pretty unusual for you to get a 5th story, but it's probably nice to have that option. If somebody comes in with a really creative, clever way to do it, you could have something really unique and special that kind of takes downtown to the next level. Would you want all of Broad Street to go 5 stories? I don't know that we get many votes for that, so something to think about. But it's that type of very fine-grained calibration that we like to think about as we go. So the other thing we've been trying to figure out while we've been here is, where would we apply this zoning strategy? And some places just go citywide. Other places do it more incrementally. Like when we're working in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I mentioned the other day, it's a fantastically historic place, and they started with their downtown. So we did this process for the downtown because it was their most precious and most at-risk area, because everybody wanted to develop there and they didn't have the proper protections in place from zoning. And then they quickly had us come back, and then we did the north end, which was adjacent to the downtown. And then we did third area, which was this Islington Street corridor, which is more suburban kind of infill stuff. And so the how you go about it, I think is important, because sometimes when you try to go citywide, it's a bit scary, especially in a place that has small town charm that people are concerned about keeping and all that. Because when you see an image like that CD5, if you're not paying attention super close, you might think, well, that could happen anywhere in the city, And so this is kind of allows you, taking a more modest step-by-step approach, allows you to kind of bring everybody up to speed as we go along, so that by the time, you start to, see development happening under the new zoning districts, you go like, wow, that's pretty great. It'd be neat if it was over here too, So what we've been looking at right now is sort of 3 different priority zones, right? So, and you could, choose to stop at any of them, right? So let's say the first priority zone is the number 1 area, and so that's kind of in the most historic core. And the way we derived that was, there was, there's the map of the historic districts, right? Well, they're kind of oddly disjointed a little bit. There's some island of this and island of that. And so when we were here 13 years ago, we did a map of showing like, here, what if you like created one that all kind of went together and was a thing? And so that was a piece of the darkest color there. And then some of these study areas I'm going to show you in a minute were kind of, oh, well, that's touching that. Well, what if you just brought that in? And this other area seems to make sense as well. And so that's kind of how that first priority zone is. So that's if you do the bare minimum, I would start there. The next one is maybe a little hard to see from back there, but there's sort of a medium tone that's kind of just expanded the edges, and that kind of corresponds to your current infill overlay district, right? And so y'all have already been thinking about infill. The strategies and the zoning that we'll be implementing and bringing forward will really take that to the next level, and so it made a lot of sense to have, maybe you want to add that in, and so they have a logical boundary. Now, then the lightest bluish color there starts to expand that even more, and I think at one point y'all had looked at maybe even having a bigger infill overlay district, and this sort of roughly corresponds to that, I think. But the idea is sort of staying within the major roadways, all of the sort of historic areas, the areas that are most at risk. And so this will get massaged over time as we go. And what we tend to see is as people understand more and more about what we're doing and the benefits of this approach, they go, well, why is my property not in the zone, right? I want to be in a character district. That's great. There may also be some people who say, oh my goodness, I'm so scared. I know everybody's excited about this, but I don't like change, and so I don't want to be in it. And so we'll have to have a discussion about that, as we go. But not saying that anyone can just opt out, by the way. But just want to kind of it's a dialogue, I guess, is the point. It's not us just saying here's what it needs to be, because really, I mean, you all as the locals probably know even better than we do, where those boundaries need to be. So we, based on where the dots were on the map for opportunity sites and some of the things that we wanted to illustrate based on what we heard from y'all, it was important to you, we picked a few sites to draw some plans on. Now, anybody in the room or at home who sees your property featured in one of these lovely plans, never fear, or you could be excited, but if you're worried about it, this isn't a proposal for something that you have to do. This isn't a suggestion even. It's an illustration to the rest of the community using particular pieces of property as to here's what it can be like if you take a character-based approach in some different types of contexts. So don't worry unless you like it. You don't have to worry, you have to be excited. So here are the areas that we looked at in a very tiny, tiny map. So we looked at the big empty area just by the church where the coffee shop is. There's a big open field there. We picked a little area for a little cottage court infill where y'all had already started doing some cottage court kind of infill. And we thought, oh, well, let's show what you could do if, expanded that a little bit. We heard, this idea of like, can we have neighborhood centers? And so we showed down by the old hospital where the helipad is and all that. That was one of our study areas. And then we heard there was lots of room for improvement in the strip mall there at the bottom of the hill. What's it called? Yeah, that area. And so we showed that. And then just kind of going out of the box and out of the zone, by the way, that we've recommended. But just wanted to show you all this. Up by the industrial park, there's a big piece of property up there, and to show you what we call an industrial village and how you could do some of this mixed housing, mixed income, and mixed use, especially for people who are working there, so they could actually walk or bike right into their job in those industrial buildings. So this is the cottage court area, and I sure wish we had the street names because I know I don't know them. Anybody want to take a guess? Okay. Okay. So there's the new houses that are there that have been built. That's what kind of inspired us. And then we saw this big block, essentially, just behind the bed and breakfast, the inn, whatever. Yep. Yeah. So so here we showed how you could, even on this small little parcel, infill with a few different things. So we have two different ways of doing a cottage court. So around the edge, where you would experience the most, we had houses that were sort of similarly sized to the other houses that were there. But then we have this pedestrian passageway that goes through where those trees kind of cut through the block. And those are actually tiny houses, a tiny house court facing each other and their porches there. And then you've got the bigger green space that goes down to Davis Street. Oh yeah, you're right. The names are on the next slide. And then, yeah, so we kind of stopped at the tree row that's right next to their parking lot. But the thing that's neat is those tiny houses are, I think, what are they, 14 by 40, I think is what we drew them at. It's kind of a tiny house size. So they're very tiny. And then the bigger ones around the edges, I think, are 30 by 40. And so still small themselves. But you could imagine that in that little spot, you could have some really good affordability going on. Huh? So in the rear, so the little small square behind the bigger ones is a garage. And then on the tiny ones, that's a little parking pad just behind them there. So, and that also, you know, the garage or not is an option you can do to bring the price down some too. So this is what we call the church village. And so we went back there. It was really cool because, you know, there's the coffee shop, and then just down from the coffee shop, there's the little market, the convenience store that's there. And so there's already sort of a neighborhood center emerging. And then we saw this big open space, and I thought, you know, it would be neat to kind of do some things, because I think they maybe have some idea for some housing going on there and some things. So we wanted to continue on with that. So here we showed another way. So adding to the connectivity of your street network, we took that cul-de-sac and kind of ran it through, and then did some little cottages along there, a little court, some that are facing in, some that are facing out. We left a big open space because we saw on the church's webpage they had all kinds of outdoor events out there. So we thought, well, we don't want to fill that up with, you know, altogether. But the idea of, you know, the church, I guess they own that, I'm not sure, but you know, wanted to do some housing. You know, it's a good way to generate some income, or also just, you know, kind of further their ministries, you know, whatever they want to put in there. So, so that was an idea there. And it also helps with that streetscape, because right now you come down the street, you got the water plant on one side, and then you look over, and there's, you know, the nice big green field, but then it's like you're looking at their parking lot in the back of the buildings. So this kind of helps formalize that edge a little bit. So here's the shopping center, and it is, you know, quite dated. I'm sure it has useful things in there, and it's probably thriving and, you know, all that. But we, you know, just kind of starting to look at, you know, there's a few different ways you can approach a site like this. One is you can just sort of get rid of the old building and start from scratch, or you can keep the old building there and kind of work around it, or you can keep the old building there, kind of hide it, and then sort of incrementally add to the site, and kind of the building can go away at some point when it makes sense. So here, you could imagine this would be quite the center of activity. So you got your parking hidden within the block. You have, you know, mixed use and some multifamily there. In this iteration, the big building is still there, but it could go away. And so we've, you know, really created a destination along Spring Street, because on the south side of the street there, you start to see we actually put buildings there too, and have a nice streetscape. And so the whole place is really transformed into something completely different than what it is today. Sure can be, yeah. So they can, you know, like a lot of times what you'll see is like along the main road that kind of comes in at this Pinecrest Drive intersection there, those would definitely start off as commercial space, and then maybe have a unit or something above them, and and along the edge, along Spring Street, and then maybe behind it where it's less visible, then they would be multifamily, or or whatever the mix wanted to be. But if it became an interesting enough destination, then they over time more commercial could go there. But it's a lot of commercial, honestly, for that site. So I imagine it would be probably a mix more with the crust of mixed use. Here's the a neighborhood kind of corner neighborhood center idea that we were looking at. We saw this site here. We understand that just above there's a nicely done, sort of walkable little neighborhood that's already planned and approved, I think, and so that's going to come in. And so we said, well, that's up there, but a lot of times intersections are an important place to sort of anchor yourself. And so what if we kind of extended what they were doing on that other site towards the corner and sort of added some gravity and became a neighborhood center? Because just off of the image, we saw there are several neighborhoods, more sort of conventional neighborhoods that don't have a center per se, but are within easy walking distance of this site. And so we thought, wouldn't it be nice if they could walk to some convenient things and a nice place, kind of like in that CD4 image that I showed. And so this seemed like a good spot for it. We did this. And so we left the existing, some of the existing big trees there that turn red in the fall, apparently. We added a little plaza on the corner and kind of worked around that. We have a smaller green space up there, and so that's sort of mixed use. You could even do something on the southern side here as well. And then we've got some residential facing into a court behind all of that. And so now you're basically creating a place that people want to go, and you could extend, I don't know what's going on in the hospital right now, but the same pattern could continue on and even start to hide some of that parking for the hospital as well, and just make this really nice spot to be. So this is that oddball one, the industrial village, way off the map that we were talking about, but just over here are the big industrial uses. And so just really quickly, just to illustrate something, we really pulled this together, but it's kind of neat to see. This is a tricky site too. There's a lot of topography. It's quite steep, but it also can make it really interesting. So we tried to kind of work with that as we went. So this is what it is today. And in here you could start to see how you could make a network of streets and parks and civic spaces, and all these different colors represent different building types and some different uses. And then trying to connect over to the industrial area, so you could have trails that go through the ravines and things for walking and biking, and then hopefully you could drive over there as well. But a number of different neighborhood centers. And I wanted to illustrate, so like you see these roads go like this. That's because they are working with the topography on the site instead of clearing it and flattening it, right? And so we've noticed that there tends to be the habit of clearing land here and just flattening it, or even if it's already flat, clearing it nonetheless because there are trees in the way. And so what we wanted to show is sort of how you can work with the landscape and get all these different things in. And so if you'll notice this, the TV sucks the laser beam in and you can't see it. But just where the road on the right comes in and there's that little triangular shaped building there, there's a green space and a longer group of townhouses that are there. So there you go. So here's the green space and the townhouses there. And the thing that's neat about this image is you've got the neighborhood market there, some townhouses, you've got multifamily, a little bit bigger building, a smaller multifamily building, a tiny house cottage court, you've got a townhouse court with a multifamily building at the end, medium and large single family houses there, smaller single family houses going through there, civic spaces, playgrounds, all of that stuff. And that's one tiny little piece of that whole thing that I just showed you. And so you could even take this, call this a pocket neighborhood, right? And so if you had a spot, maybe more in town even, that was a smaller site, you could still do all of that on a relatively small site. You don't have to have, this whole thing. I mean, that literally is just that first block when you come in. It's hard to wrap your mind around. So anyway, and then for fun, we just couldn't help ourselves. Y'all have done a great job and made this amazing town green. And we were looking around, and you've got sort of one-story 1970s building kind of here or there, and but on one side you've got historic houses that face in on it, and so it does a really good job holding it. And on the other side, you've got the Great Wall of Cypress, right? The Leland cypress there, and the fence, and so you know, again, we're not from around here, so we couldn't help ourselves. I know y'all worked hard and probably thought about all these things, so please forgive me if we're just telling y'all what you already thought of. So anyway, looked at this and did a little plan. So what you can see at the top of the image there, the orange, those are townhouses, row houses, live-work buildings just below those in that sort of bluish color, facing onto the green space. And so we've got parking behind them. We've got added in a couple of little houses over there on the right-hand side because there are some gaps in the streetscape still, and they would fit right in with the existing houses. We've got a few townhouses here with a little pocket park in front of them. It's a small multifamily house, like 4 or 6 units there, another one there. This is your existing Great Pyramid. And then you've got your bandstand, and then when you look at the bandstand, it kind of bleeds into the parking lot, right? And so we made a couple little sites there for some buildings on either side of it, flanking it to kind of enclose the parking. So you have a sort of a neat view there. And then the pyramid rises up over them. What is that called, by the way? That's not a pyramid. What do y'all call that?
Fertilizer silo.
That's what you call it? Okay. Fertilizer plant. The Monroe monolith. I don't know what. So we showed some of the buildings there in the strip where the Italian restaurant or the whatever is. They're kind of neater buildings, and then other part sort of added on are just sort of metal buildings. So we're like, okay, well, where the neat stuff stops, maybe you can do something different there. So we've got some live work, some row houses, a little mixed-use building there, left the existing buildings at the end, some townhouses on the backside, starting to define that street, parking behind all of that. And then the street, sort of where the hedgerow is now, we've shown as what's called a Wunnerf, or a shared street, a pedestrian priority street, and it sort of waggles through there. And so it would be paved, kind of like pavers all the way across, and so very, very sort of European feeling. We've got a little spot up there by the building that you have up next to the street for some little kiosks, little vendor kind of things, because the park has now gotten a little bit wider as a result of not having to have the buffer. And then we've got a spot for a few food trucks that could go in there. And then what else we got? Yeah, we kind of dealt with parking in some different ways. But down here, we had some of the neighbors come in, and they were talking about concerns they had about what was going to happen with the property there. The what? Yeah, that. And so the building on the corner, right? And so we sketched a little plan. Oh, this would have helped. Zoom in. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the zoom in. Now we'll scooch down here. And so what this represents, the purple, is an inn and cottages that kind of are associated with the inn. And so the idea is that we actually worked with the building that's there because it has some little charm on it. And so you probably can't see from here, there's like a little pink edge around one of the purple buildings. That's the existing facade. So we kind of left it and worked with it and sort of sprouted out of it. And then the hotel kind of organically wraps its way around the site. There are all these beautiful, huge trees that are out there, and so that's kind of what led us to this pattern, and you can't see it on this image, but we literally were like looking at the aerial photograph, and there's a tree there, so we moved it over, and that's why the parking kind of does that thing, because there's some big trees that we were working around there, and so you've got the smaller cottages that feel, kind of similar to the houses there, but they'd be part of the inn. And then moving over here, some townhouses that could be just separate, and then a small apartment building at the corner here. We almost drew something over there, but we just left it alone because you guys get the idea. We can do courts and mix of housing types and all that stuff. So this is a blast from the past. I don't think it looks like that anymore. You probably can't get a lazy boy in the sunroom anymore, right? So I don't know if y'all have ever seen this, but when we came here all those years ago, 13 years ago, this was the thing that I got most excited about. I was looking at the old Sanborn fire insurance maps, and I found that there used to be an alley that ran through here. That's why that side of that building is so fancy. And it was called Arnold's Alley. And then I was like, oh, well, that explains why that building is such an oddball in the streetscape. And so we went around back and, oh, shoot, where is it? Hold on. There we go. So that's what it looked like. And we were excited because it looks different than that today. And we drew this picture I'm about to show you 13 years ago to show you what it could look like. And we said, hey, wouldn't it be great if you punch back through and all that stuff? And so, you know, you start to see now we planted that seed and it just is grow on your own without any fancy zoning code and all that stuff. That's, for me, so encouraging and so exciting that y'all are, you know, kind of that kind of a community and to have gotten to that point. This is one of my favorite images we've ever drawn too. And so I love showing this. So let me go back here. All right, so this is what I call room for improvement. This is another one we did way back in the day. So we've noticed that y'all, you know, you have your great broad street and the beautiful historic courthouse building and your useful Chamber of Commerce building, I suppose. Is that still Chamber of Commerce there? Okay, so see how things change. Uses change every time. So nonetheless, you can tell that building wasn't always here, right? And we thought, wouldn't this be a great spot to illustrate how a form-based approach can help you in some of these more in-town areas as well. And so, you know, here you go. So here's the before, so that tire depot, and you know, so now it starts to be built out. The chamber building now is these cool market buildings. You already did a neat thing with the corner there with the burger place, I guess. But on the right-hand side, we left the gas station. We call that gas backwards, right? So here's the pumps in the back, the gas pumps, and the building is pulled up to the street. So it defines that edge, but you still have the use of the gas there, and you got some live-work buildings here in the foreground, and you know, parking all nicely tucked away. And so, you know, it's, you know, obviously quite a transformation before and after there. Oh, and we actually even added a building up next to City Hall. You see at the top right of the image. We added that, so we made this sort of grand civic space outside of City Hall as well. So anyway, form-based can do some lots of really cool things in a number of different contexts. You know, some of them smaller and more, you know, sort of simple. Others are more grand. But the idea is that there's no better way to protect and preserve and enhance and continue the small town charm that you all love. And so I think that's, yeah. So for anyone who wants to know what's next, we are here at the Codeapalooza. Once we leave here, we'll continue working on the draft of the code. We'll then get that to staff and they'll review it. A public draft will be coming out in the summer. We'll do a little orientation presentation of it. We'll get, the community will have time to give feedback, so you'll give your comments to the city. They'll put them all together, give them to us, and then we will work on the final draft of the code, and then you all will take it through and adopt it, hopefully quickly, because in the meantime, you know, all the people who are interested in developing here that could have inspired this process to even happen are still looking to develop, and they're not necessarily waiting around on the zoning ordinance. So one of the things that I will say is, you know, we heard about new development that's coming to town, and it doesn't have that small town charm that y'all are looking for, and you know, I've called it cookie cutter and those sorts of things, and I got to go see it, and I was surprised how unprotected you are by your current ordinance. The newer neighborhoods where they literally have clear cut all the trees. The houses are practically all the same. You know, just little silly things like, and this is I'm giving a very small example of something, that is a piece of a bigger problem. But when you drive through some of the neighborhoods, just take a look at the windows. And to notice if you think the shutters will actually close all the way across the window on the one window that has a shutter, as opposed all the other ones don't have shutters, right? And so there's some weird stuff going on that is not difficult to resolve. But the problem is right now that they are meeting the rules, meeting the standards. And so what can you do? You can't say no. And, moving forward, we need to find a way to make sure that you all are as protected as you want to be from development that is somebody, actually a participant called it soulless development. And something that you all can feel good about standing behind and saying, no, this is the line in the sand. This is what you do when you do development in Monroe, and here's why. We had a process. It's very, thoughtfully laid out, and we've measured and documented, and it's not arbitrary. And here's where we want to go in the future. And so hopefully that's where we'll get through this process. So that's all I've got. Q&A. Let's talk. What do y'all think? Hopes, dreams, fears. Anybody scared? Anybody excited?
I love your renderings and your plans. I really like what you're doing with Madison Lakes. Because that is in our immediate, it's the immediate future, right?
Yeah.
It's what an area that we need to attack. Making your city center buildings up in this area, which you're living right now, which is beautiful.
Great. Thanks.
Do you think that
You got to get it on tape.
Yeah, sorry. I read a couple of weeks ago that tiny houses were not going to be here much longer. And I didn't know that. I didn't have that impression, but that scared me. And with you showing those, it makes me concerned because I think it could be good. I don't know.
Yeah, and so what you heard about tiny houses not being here, you mean here as in Monroe, or here as in like people don't think it's a good thing anymore? Just, okay. Yeah, well, I don't know who said that, but the one thing I will point to is that you all may have one of the largest populations of tiny houses anywhere in the country. If you look around, they just happen to be historic mill houses, right? And so we don't think about that, but they're, especially the ones that are duplexes, they're like very small square footage and very modest and simply built and charming. And that's the thing about it. When you look at some of the most modest houses that have ever been built in the city for the people who are working in the mills, they have way more character than a lot of the new houses that are being built here. Even though the new houses are all this stuff going on, dormers and gables and materials and stone wallpaper and all this stuff. And, and so there are some lessons to be learned, not only about how to lay out a town and a neighborhood, but also how to do simple architecture, because a lot of times, and the question was asked the other night, what kind of pushback will we get, about doing something like this from the development community? And my answer was there are kind of two types that you'll find. Those who say, like the mayor did, this is great, I'm excited about this, let's go, and really lean into it. And then there are those who are going to say, I don't want to have to do something different than I've been doing, even if I'll make more money doing it. It's just too much effort. And so I'm going to kick and scream and moan and complain. And that's okay. But one of the things that if we're looking at some of those simple houses, and one of the reasons they'll complain is they'll say, well, it's expensive to do these nice things. Well, nothing in these images is not anything different than what you see in your older neighborhoods. It's just how you lay stuff out on the site. And if we're looking at the simplest, most modest buildings for some of the inspiration, for some of the things we're doing, and then there's grand houses you can look at for inspiration as well. But if somebody starts saying, oh, it's expensive, and you say, let me show you how you can do some really, really charming houses with very simple architecture and materials. As long as you get the details right, it's going to be charming. And so I think tiny houses are here to stay because they've been here since the first hut was built. It was the first tiny house, and then somebody got a bigger one, and then, and especially these days with the affordability issue that we have, the housing prices. Now, that said, even though tiny houses are more efficient than larger houses, because you can get more on a smaller area of land, they're not as efficient or affordable as having a multifamily building, 4, 6, 8-plex unit, because that's even more efficient. But there's still, that's why we show the drawings what we do. There's all of those things working together to meet all of the different price points and preferences. Who else? Okay, awesome. Is the football game still going on?
At least one going on.
Yeah, okay. So, thank you all for coming and participating throughout the week. We will be back. We will keep working. If you've got any big ideas that just pop in your head, I'm sure Brad's ready to catch them, and he'll pass them along to us. If you know people, tell them this is going on. Hopefully, the room isn't standing room only, because people are kind of satisfied with, one, what you've been doing so far, and two, the things that we've been talking about throughout the past several days, that we are kind of listening and trying to reflect back what we've been hearing, and are being really careful about this. And it hopefully should just be something to be excited about and embraced. But for me, as much as I could have stopped on the first comment of I love what you showed, the thing that I really love is to hear people who are concerned, and so we can talk about it. Because the worst thing to do is to have concerns raised right here as y'all are going through the approval process of the zoning ordinance. And somebody's going to say, I didn't know about it. And there's, sandwich signs all over the place, email blasts, and signs everywhere, and somehow some people have heard about it, and we'll have multiple chances for people to give feedback. So anybody who shows up at the last minute and says, this is no good, first thing I'm going to ask is, how was the process for you, right? So thank you all for your time.
Brian, can I ask one question?
Yes,
Sorry.
Oh.
Can you go back to and just dig into, sorry, Mayor, can you just dig into the implementation phasing suggestion, that slide again a little bit, and sort of the pros and the cons? Because I know a long time ago when we had this conversation, it was don't do it all citywide, but then, we didn't get there. So if you waved a magic wand and tomorrow the code was implemented, what colors would it apply? Would apply all of the blue, black, blue, and blue?
I mean, I think priority zones 1 and 2, the darkest and the second darkest, should definitely be done. If y'all are at a point 13 years later where it's not quite as scary because y'all all have been thinking about this kind of thing for that long, then the third priority zone, I think, would be easy.
And then for the balance, what is your suggestion on how the balance is handled, not only from a zoning ordinance perspective, but just how it's handled in an approach with property owners, developers, and the like that are coming into the town?
Yeah, so the rest of the city that is not developed or is developed in a more conventional suburban pattern or whatever, you can do a few different things. And the reason why it sometimes works really well to kind of do a phased approach like this is when y'all go through the adoption process, everybody who's going to want to hear about it is going to hear about it. And all of the education happens, and people dig in and study it and all that. And so by the time you get outside of the areas that people are like, oh, it's obviously should be there. If it's questionable, then they're like, okay, well, I see that my single-family neighborhood, even though it was built in 1975, has the same kind of characteristics as the historic neighborhood. It's just built differently, and architecture is a little different, but those standards are still applicable. So CD3 is okay. I'm not scared of that. CD3, yeah. And then when you're looking at greenfield sites, new development coming in, then essentially you've got this kit of parts, you know, and the comprehensive plan says, you know, do these different character districts in different areas, but now everybody knows what the pieces should be for a new development, and they can follow those standards.
And so is that the tan area or whatever then is that sort of then the character-based code is an optional overlay in those areas, you know, or it's just guidance? You stick with the traditional Euclidean zoning on the perimeter, and then the character-based code is optional or a suggestion or what?
Well, so for instance, this little strip mall redevelopment thing we showed, obviously, and the reason we picked that one is because it's kind of close into town, so it made sense to be in. But it's also applicable elsewhere. Anywhere that pattern was continued throughout the city, you can say, oh, well, the way we've dealt with that, the zoning can just move there. And so really it becomes more of a mapping exercise. And there may be some things where it's warranted in some of these other areas to have some either additional character districts or sub-districts. So like sometimes there's enough of a difference in the conventional suburban neighborhoods versus the historic neighborhoods where we'll have a conventional versus traditional CD3. So there's some things like that. But as far as it being optional, you could do it that way. You know, yeah, just, I mean, obviously it's better than not having it, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Before Brian has a seat, do we have any more questions? Rosalind? The original spill you did on Wednesday.
Yes. Is that going to be available on tape, or I wasn't able to make it, so I wanted to see it.
It's on the YouTube channel, yep.
Right. These will all be on YouTube. And frankly, while I was sitting there listening to you, I was thinking of all the people that I hope are watching. Shane Short from our Development Authority is watching. And I'm going to call out the folks at Quality Foods as well. Say, look, this is what we've been begging for, to see something that will actually work. We're very lucky to have Chad Draper, who has kind of helped drive the bus for us for the last 13 years. Paul Rosenthal, the same thing. Rick and Krista, who've done the Wayfarer project that you specifically pointed out. So the folks that have the buy-in and are actually showing how much they appreciate the work that you do are all still on board, and we're lucky to have them. We as a council have invited you to help us make Monroe better, and that's why we're all here. So appreciate the work that your team has done, and we get to see you again when?
No, when are we back? When am I back? Summer?
Summer, Brad?
Yep, so we'll go from freezing cold to blazing hot, hopefully. You know?
And it'll be great. We'll all be in shorts. For those of you who are here, for those of you who are watching at home, we appreciate it. Of course, you're tuning in. But please bring us any of your concerns, any questions, any things that you would like to see that might help us make a better Monroe. And then we'll get with Brian and his team and implement just as much as we possibly can. So thank you for being here, and thank you all for listening.